"What's going on with you two?" I exclaimed as I walked in from work, only to find my husband and daughter sprawled on the living room floor. "What's wrong?" I rushed to their side, panic rising in my chest. They were both in the midst of a seizure, struggling to breathe. Without hesitation, I dialed for paramedics, and they were swiftly transported for treatment. As we rushed to the hospital, I was bombarded with questions, but all I could offer were fragmented observations. I was as clueless as anyone about what had caused this sudden collapse. In the hospital, as the doctors tended to them, I was ushered into a separate room, heart pounding with dread. "Are they okay?" I asked, desperation lacing my voice. "They'll be fine," the doctor assured me, especially Bonnie. The gravity of the situation hit me like a ton of bricks. My strength seemed to evaporate at the doctor's words. From that moment, I was thrust into a whirlwind of uncertainty. My name is Wendy, and for the past 5 years, I've been married to Harley, living with our daughter Bonnie. I met Harley during my days as a post office clerk. He frequented the office to send out his handmade items for sale on a flea market app. What began as mere clerical exchanges gradually evolved into conversations, and soon I learned his name. After one routine transaction, Harley left me a piece of paper, hastily scrawled with his phone number. I hesitated, unsure of what to do. Eventually, curiosity won over, and I dialed the number. "Hello." His voice on the other end was a mix of surprise and anticipation. "Is this Wendy?" he asked. "Yes, it's me. Did you give me your number?" I couldn't help but chuckle. I had been jittery before making the call, but somehow, those nerves dissipated as soon as we began talking. Before I knew it, an hour had flown by, and Harley casually asked me out on a date for the following week. "Next week sounds perfect," I replied, feeling a surge of excitement. "I'm looking forward to it." And so, our dates became a regular occurrence. With each outing, we grew closer, our connection deepening organically. It wasn't long before our companionship blossomed into something more meaningful. There were no grand declarations of love, just a gradual understanding between us. When I was 26 and Harley was 28, he proposed. My response was an enthusiastic yes. I envisioned a blissful married life ahead of us, but reality had other plans. "I'm glad your parents were so welcoming," Harley remarked as we walked towards my childhood home. "I hope mine will be too." "I'm not so sure about that," I admitted, "but let's hope for the best." As we entered, my parents greeted us warmly, offering their congratulations. It was a heartwarming moment until my sister, Meryl, appeared. "Did you forget to tell Mr. Harley about me?" she teased, catching me off guard. "I'm sorry, I should have explained," I stammered, feeling a pang of guilt for not preparing Harley. Once the confusion was cleared up, pleasantries were exchanged, but little did I know, this encounter would unravel into a nightmare. Afterwards, my sister and I discussed the situation. Our relationship had never been particularly close, especially after I left home to support our ailing mother. I had sacrificed my education fund for her medical expenses, a decision she couldn't comprehend. I harbor no regrets about the choice I made. Sacrificing my education fund for my ailing mother was a decision I stand by. However, Meryl didn't take kindly to it. That moment became a turning point in our relationship. Despite having walked similar paths until then, from that juncture, we drifted apart. Our communication dwindled, and we seldom kept in touch. Even during occasional visits home, we made a point to avoid each other as much as possible. That dynamic remained unchanged. Yet, strangely, she seemed genuinely pleased about my marriage. "I thought this might break the ice," I remarked, attempting to lighten the tension. "That's nice. I wish I could find someone like Harley," she mused wistfully. "I'm sure you'll meet someone wonderful," I reassured her. But her response caught me off guard. "Actually, I think he may have already appeared," she hinted with an enigmatic smile that lingered in my mind. And so our married life began. With the arrival of our daughter, we reached the pinnacle of happiness. However, as time passed, subtle changes crept into our lives. Harley started coming home unusually late and began venturing out more frequently, even on holidays. Then, tragedy struck. Upon returning from work one day, I found both my husband and daughter lying unconscious in the living room. Panic surged through me as I rushed to their side, calling for help. Paramedics arrived swiftly, whisking them away for treatment. What happened? I asked frantically as they were taken to the hospital. I don't know, I confessed, my mind reeling with fear and confusion. At the hospital, after hours of agonizing wait, the doctor finally called me aside. Are they okay? I asked, bracing myself for the worst. They're stable now, the doctor assured me, but they've suffered from acute nicotine pesticide poisoning. Relief flooded through me, but it was short-lived as the gravity of the situation sank in. Caught in a whirlwind of emotions, I found myself grappling with an unexpected turn of events. I am sorry, I mumbled, struggling to process the ordeal. I was taken aback by the diagnosis. What is acute nicotine pesticide poisoning? I inquired, my voice trembling with worry. It's a poisoning caused by ingesting an ingredient found in pesticides, the doctor explained. Symptoms include dizziness, convulsions, and difficulty breathing. Dread gripped me as I absorbed the severity of the situation. The doctors bombarded me with questions, probing for any clues about what could have caused it. But I was at a loss. I couldn't even recall what they had eaten before I arrived home. They were admitted to the hospital for further examination, but the next day brought a new wave of distress. Police officers arrived at our home. What's going on? I demanded, my heart racing with anxiety. This case appears to be more than just an accident. One officer stated, we'll be investigating it as a potential crime. Can you tell us exactly how you found them? Their scrutinizing gazes made me uneasy. It was clear they harbored suspicions, though I couldn't fathom why. Nevertheless, I cooperated with their inquiries, hoping to dispel any doubts. During the search, an officer discovered pesticides in our trash can. I don't know anything about this, I protested, genuine confusion clouding my mind. I don't remember buying it. Despite my protests, I was escorted to the police station for further questioning. I reasoned that fleeing would only deepen their suspicions. At the station, they took my fingerprints, which were later matched to those found on the pesticide container. I was detained pending the results. Anxiety gnawed at me as I awaited the outcome. When the results came back, the officer's words struck me like a blow. Your fingerprints match those on the pesticide, he declared. You're now a suspect in an attempted murder case. I was stunned. How could this be? I couldn't comprehend why my fingerprints were on the pesticide, let alone why I would harm my own family. As I sat in the interrogation room, my mind raced with confusion and fear. The interrogation stretched on, each question digging deeper into my actions on that fateful day. It started like any other day. I began, my voice trembling. I went to work at the post office as usual. After my usual lunch at a nearby cafe, which lasted about an hour, I returned home. I recounted to the officer. He seemed satisfied, but then he asked about the day before. That afternoon, I went to a nearby supermarket and bought a cake, I explained. After that, I went straight home. The officer then presented me with a laptop. Take a look at this, he said, showing me a video clip from a surveillance camera at a store. In the footage, a woman stood in front of a shelf stocked with pesticides. Is that not you in the video? The officer inquired. My heart skipped a beat as I scrutinized the screen. What is this? Why, it's me, I gasped. But then realization dawned on me. No, wait, this is not me. The officers exchanged incredulous glances. Are you sure? One asked cautiously. I pointed to the screen, where I noticed a detail. Look here, I urged, indicating a mole near the woman's mouth. I don't have a mole. This isn't me. It's my twin sister, Meryl. The revelation stunned even the police. Your twin sister. They echoed in disbelief. As they reviewed the evidence, they found footage of me at the supermarket wearing the same clothes as the woman in the video. However, no one outside my family would know if I had left the house dressed like that. It all makes sense now, I murmured. That's what it meant. Concern flooded me as I realized the implications. What has happened to my husband? I inquired anxiously. If he's out of the hospital and back at home, please check on him immediately. I believe he's been seeing my sister. The officer looked taken aback. How can you be so sure? Taking a deep breath, I explained, because they're having an affair. They're trying to frame me. But your husband is a victim too, isn't he? That way, suspicion would be diverted. The gravity of the situation seemed to dawn on the police. We'll need to investigate further, the officer conceded. I understand, I replied. But please check on both of them. It'll reveal everything. I understood that I was being detained. Typically, I would have been arrested immediately, but they decided to hold off on my arrest, recognizing the significance of my testimony. It felt like I was hanging on by a thread. 2 days later, I was summoned back to the interrogation room. As you suspected, we looked into your husband and found evidence of an affair, the officer informed me. We spoke to him, and he confessed to everything. I'm sorry about this, the officer continued. It was our oversight. For the time being, I was exonerated, but the ordeal was far from over. The betrayal by Harley and Merrill cut deep, especially considering they had implicated my young daughter. I knew I had to confront Harley. You've done a despicable thing, I told him, struggling to contain my anger. I can't believe you involved Bonnie in this to frame me. Merrill must have been behind this. Indeed, it turned out that Merrill had orchestrated the entire scheme. She had suggested preparing pesticides to frame me as a murderer. Harley, under her influence, had bought the pesticide and laced the cake with it while I was away at work, just as I had come to visit him. So, where is Merrill? I demanded. I don't know, Harley confessed. I couldn't reach her before the police took me. She must have run away. You'll pay for your crimes, I warned him. You're not getting away with this. As expected, Merrill had disappeared, but the police eventually found her hiding out at a man's home she had met through a dating service. She was taken to the police station, where she confessed to everything. I rushed to the police station to confront her. Merrill, why did you do this to me? Because I've never liked you since you left, she spat back. Then she revealed her resentment, explaining how she felt inferior to me for sacrificing my education for our family's sake. Despite the pain and betrayal, I couldn't help but feel a pang of pity for my sister. Her negative feelings towards me had festered over time, culminating in incidents like this one. Was that why you approached Harley? I asked, struggling to comprehend her motives. I just thought that if I slept with your husband, you would despair, she confessed coldly. When he came to greet me at the wedding, I knew I could manipulate him. In other words, she didn't choose Harley for who he was. She chose him because he was my husband. He said he was going to be with you when I was gone. That stupid man had a crush on me. I just made it easy for me to take advantage of him, she continued, devoid of remorse. I can't forgive Harley, but still, he was just being used by her. Despite the betrayal, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pity for Harley. Why did you target Bonnie? I demanded, struggling to contain my anger. Of course, it's because she's your daughter, she retorted, callously confirming my suspicions. Well, whatever the reason, what you did is unforgivable. You'll pay for it for the rest of your life, I vowed, my voice trembling with anger. With those words, she was taken away. The trial of Harley and Merrill commenced. My husband was accused of framing me for attempted murder and faced numerous charges. In the end, he was sentenced to prison, including payment of alimony. Merrill, too, faced trial, and despite her execution, she would soon serve her sentence and come out. However, even if they atoned for their crimes, the scars of their actions would linger. They would forever be labeled as ex-convicts. Meanwhile, my parents offered to move in with us. Would you and Bonnie like to come live with us? My mother proposed. I think your mom would be happy if you did. Though hesitant at first, I accepted her offer for my mother's sake, who was exhausted from the ordeal. With my mother's recovery and Bonnie's cheerful presence, our new life together began. From now on, the four of us would reside in a new house, finding happiness together.
"Oh, I can't unlock the door," I muttered to myself in disbelief. After a long day at work, I found my personal belongings strewn unceremoniously in front of the entrance as though they were discarded refuse. The front door appeared different, perhaps replaced, stubbornly refusing to yield to my attempts to open it. It was the final indignity in a series of hardships endured during the years I lived with my in-laws. With resolve hardening, I made a firm decision. I would not set foot in that house again. Gathering my things, I vowed to pack them into my car and return to the sanctuary of my parents' home. Months passed, and just as suddenly as I had left, a message arrived from my estranged in-laws, rekindling a connection long thought lost. "Hello, my name is Emily. I'm 35 years old. My husband, Tom, is 5 years my junior." I was completely focused on my career, and he happened to be my subordinate at work. Honestly, marriage wasn't on my radar. I wasn't keen on the idea of settling down, having never really dated before. Yet I ended up married, all thanks to his persistent pursuit. He assured me I could continue working as I pleased post-marriage, handling all household chores himself. His approach intrigued me about the prospect of marriage. And it's not that I oppose having children. Even though I had never been keen on marriage, thoughts of having children occasionally crossed my mind. Approaching 35, I realized time was running out if I wanted to start a family, so I chose to marry my current husband. Initially, it was just the two of us after we married. True to his word, he supported my career and took on most of the household responsibilities. However, our situation took a sharp turn about 6 months into our marriage when my father-in-law unexpectedly passed away. The sudden loss of my healthy father-in-law left my mother-in-law and my younger sister-in-law, Catherine, who is 33, reeling. They claimed they couldn't manage on their own. She's a freelancer with a decent income, but her focus on fan activities means her financial stability isn't robust. I always felt she should pursue a full-time job. Whenever Catherine approached me along with my mother-in-law, Tom broached the idea of us all living together. "Emily, have you considered moving in with my mom and sister? You can continue freelancing as usual, and having them around would lighten the household workload even more. What do you think?" "Tom, I'm okay with keeping up my work, but I'm not sure about taking on more household chores. If your mom moves in and we're assisting her, shouldn't she be handling most of the household tasks?" "Fair point. I'll talk to my mom and sister about it. Please think about living together." "I'll wait until I hear a clear response from your mother and Catherine. I have my own life and financial considerations to take into account. I've made it clear to my husband that I want all aspects carefully considered. It may seem cold, but caregiving involves careful planning." Ultimately, my husband assured me that his family would manage all household chores. I thought about insisting on a written agreement, but kept that thought to myself. Well, they're technically family, so I trust they'll keep their word. And so we moved into my husband's family home. On our first day there, I paid a visit to greet my mother-in-law. I'm looking forward to living together. As Tom may have mentioned, I'll continue with my work as usual, so I hope you and Catherine can manage the household chores. In response, my mother-in-law didn't even glance at me before remarking, "Why did Tom marry someone like her? She works, so all the household chores will fall on me. Is that acceptable for a wife? Normally, a wife would handle both work and household duties, wouldn't she?" Her expectation that she would do it all was simply unbelievable. She made sure I heard her loud and clear before exiting the scene. "What? This isn't what I expected at all." My mother-in-law's words left me feeling uneasy about our future life together. As we busily sorted through our belongings, Catherine suddenly appeared at the doorway and remarked, "I ended up with a less than adorable sister-in-law. Poor Tom." With that, she swiftly departed. Not again. First my mother-in-law, now Catherine. I couldn't understand why they would choose to live with me after speaking about me in such a way. Later, I would discover that it was all about my money. Shortly after moving in together, I noticed something troubling. On our first day under the same roof, despite their earlier sarcastic remarks, both my mother-in-law and Catherine completely ignored me. They managed to prepare meals only when my husband was present, but they made no effort to assist with cleaning or laundry for me. I attempted to confront them about their broken promises several times. However, whenever I addressed my mother-in-law respectfully as "ma'am," she would shoot me a sharp glare and walk away, making it clear she had no intention of engaging with me. Catherine didn't behave exactly like her mother. but I found myself unable to protest against either of them. Over time, doing my own laundry and cleaning after returning from work became a regular routine. I wanted to confide in my husband about it, but I hesitated out of sympathy for him. However, their behavior began to worsen. When they faced financial constraints for leisure activities, they started subtly pressuring me for more money. Their approach was evasive, as if they preferred not to confront me directly, leaving notes under my food. Just today, I found a note from my mother-in-law. "We're in a tight spot this month. Could you lend us $300? I considered discussing it with my husband, but he seemed strapped for cash due to social obligations and drinking habits, requesting, "Could we cut down on expenses this month?" Back when he was my subordinate, I always made sure he didn't overspend on unnecessary parties. However, after changing departments post-marriage, he found it difficult to decline invitations, and these expenses began to accumulate. I found it difficult to bring up the financial demands with him, so reluctantly, I gave in to their requests, treating it as a loan. This pattern persisted for 2 years. My husband grew increasingly comfortable with not contributing to household expenses, often urging me to cut costs each month with seeming indifference. Even I had grown accustomed to this routine. I felt trapped in a cycle of endless schemes, yet there was something else I continued to do. I'll explain that shortly. One day, upon returning from work, I found numerous items scattered outside the house. Upon closer inspection, I realized they were my belongings. "What is this?" I seethed with anger at the sight of my belongings treated so disrespectfully. Determined to voice my grievances, I attempted to unlock the front door, only to find that my key no longer worked. Damn it, they changed the locks while I was gone. I can't take this anymore. Surveying my scattered belongings, I pondered my next steps. That's when I noticed another note beneath the items. It read, "Don't ever return. We don't want to see your face. Consider yourself lucky we didn't toss out your stuff." What terrible in-laws. My mother-in-law and Catherine were undoubtedly the masterminds behind this. I wondered what Tom had said about the situation, but by now, it didn't matter to me. Luckily, I had my car keys handy. I quickly loaded as many of my belongings as I could into the car and drove straight to my parents' house. I felt relieved knowing my things were safe. At least my work wouldn't be affected the next day. Arriving at my parents' home, they were visibly shocked but warmly welcomed me back. It felt comforting to be in my childhood home again, a place I hadn't visited much in the past 2 busy years. Sipping the tea my mother brewed, surrounded by the familiar warmth, my father asked me, "Why did you bring all your belongings here? Did you leave their house?" Marriage requires patience, I mused, reflecting on the weight of those words. For 2 years, my interactions with my mother-in-law and Catherine were sparse, limited mostly to the occasional reminder notes about money. Tom gradually became reliant solely on my income, and recently it felt like he viewed me merely as a convenient ATM. I endured this situation until now. When I confided in my parents, they empathized, saying, "Emily, you've been patient enough. We won't ask you to endure any longer. Now that they've driven you away, there's no reason to go back, right? Perhaps you should consider sending Tom a divorce notice." That's true. He seemed like a decent young man when you married him, but money has a way of changing people. It's a shame. Both my father and mother showed genuine sympathy for me, a kindness I hadn't experienced in the past 2 years. Tears unexpectedly welled up in my eyes. "Has it been that tough for you?" my father asked, his expression filled with concern. "No, it's just that I haven't felt this level of sympathy in a long time. It's comforting, like you said, Dad. I'll send Tom the divorce papers, but I want to observe the situation for a while. I have a feeling something interesting might unfold soon." Indeed, I sensed that some action would unfold soon. Surprisingly, that moment arrived about 3 months later. By then, I had moved out of my parents' home and settled into a new apartment of my own. Never did I imagine reclaiming control over my earnings to spend as I please. I hired a household service for chores, freeing me to enjoy my days off with trips and purchases I had long desired, unrestrained. Each day reminded me of the value of my hard-earned income. I began questioning why I endured those 2 years. It dawned on me that perhaps I had been influenced or even manipulated by my in-laws. Then, precisely 3 months after my keys were changed and my belongings cast out, my smartphone buzzed with an unexpected call. Initially, I considered ignoring it. After dismissing the first call, my phone buzzed again, then a third time in rapid succession. "They must be in some trouble," I surmised. I picked up the next call, and immediately the fourth one came through. Hello. Emily, where are you? I went to your parents' house, but they wouldn't tell me. I also tried your workplace, but they wouldn't disclose your whereabouts. It was my mother-in-law, someone who had ignored me for the past 2 years. Her voice, which I hadn't heard in a long time, sounded cautious. Despite answering the call, I remained silent for a moment, relishing the anticipation of what she might say next. Hello, Emily. Are you there? Come back soon and restore our lives. We can't even afford to go out and enjoy ourselves. What are we supposed to do now? I had thought that living without spending money on leisure would suffice, but evidently that wasn't the case. Our phone and electricity are on the verge of being cut off. We're at our wits' end. Please come back immediately. Does she not realize she's only thinking of herself? Shouldn't she begin with an apology for throwing me out? Until she grasps that, I had no intention of responding. Emily, you're not saying anything. Are you listening at all? Doesn't it bother you to hear that we're in such dire straits? Realizing she wasn't going to offer an apology, I decided to end the call and press the button to hang up. She seems to have no concept of remorse. The next day, my phone rang again. Hello, Emily. Why did you ignore Mom's call yesterday? Even though we're in trouble, you didn't make any effort to help. She couldn't tell if you were even listening. Ignoring calls like that isn't very mature. This time, it was Catherine calling. Honestly, calls from Catherine have always been the most bothersome, and she had the nerve to lecture about not ignoring calls. They've ignored me for 2 years, and suddenly I'm the one in the wrong. I couldn't believe her audacity. I planned to endure the call a bit longer, but without an apology, I had no intention of responding. I heard from Mom, but we're facing financial troubles at home. Our phone and electricity might get cut off soon. Without AC this heat, we could suffer from heat stroke. Can you live with that? If our phone goes dead, how will we reach you? So please come back soon and help us pay the overdue bills. Her selfish demands made it easy for me to keep ignoring her. Hey, are you listening? You haven't said a word. Oh, are you still upset about what happened 3 months ago? That was obviously just a joke. You're overreacting. As an adult, you should know the difference between a joke and a serious matter. Stop being stubborn and come back home. They threw out my belongings like trash and changed the locks so I couldn't get in. That's a clear message for me not to return. Even if they claim it was all a joke or prank now, I find it hard to believe. Since Catherine doesn't seem interested in apologizing either, I decided to end the call. It would be a waste of time to listen to her any longer. The next day, I finally received a call from my husband. Hello, Emily. I'm sorry. My mother, my sister, and we all realize we've done terrible things. Can you come back? Our household is falling apart. We're out of money, everyone's on edge, and tensions are high. We sincerely apologize and want you back, please. My husband seemed to feel the need to apologize at least, but it's too late now. Why did he ignore me for 3 months? If it had only been the first 3 days, I might have considered returning, but it's been 3 months. I've embraced my new life, enjoying every moment of independence. There's no reason for me to return to that family now. I appreciate your apology, but given everything that's happened, I have no intention of coming back. Tom, why were you unreachable for 3 months? How could you do that as a husband? I looked into things, and guess what? I found out you've been cheating, haven't you? That's what the detective agency told me. Thanks for treating me like an ATM for 2 years. I'll be sending divorce papers. Please handle it accordingly. Maybe my husband thought he wouldn't get caught. What a fool. Yet he still had the nerve to say, I want you to come back. So I replied, if you reimburse me for all the living expenses for the 3 of us over the past 2 years and repay the money I lent you, maybe I'll consider it. Let's see, that's about $20,000. Can you manage that? I said mockingly. I knew he couldn't pay, but I said it anyway. After that, my husband fell silent and abruptly ended the call. Perhaps he finally realized my decision was firm. What happened next? When I sent the divorce papers and a bill for emotional distress to my husband, he returned the signed divorce papers promptly. Now all I need to do is file them at the city office and the divorce will be finalized. Regarding the compensation, he transferred the money right away. In fact, I included a note with the bill threatening to expose him to his company if he didn't pay promptly. Fearful of this, my husband likely sought a loan to cover the compensation. I heard from sources that their family home is now on the market. It seems they're struggling financially and trying to raise funds. However, selling their primary residence hastily means they'll now have to rent elsewhere. Considering the cost of rent and utilities, selling their house may not have been the wisest decision. They were likely driven by the immediate need for cash and didn't think through the long-term consequences. Whatever happens to that family is no longer my concern. As for me, I'm thoroughly enjoying my single life. I've had my fill of marriage. Moving forward, I plan to work hard and savor my personal life, embracing my independence. Hi, I'm Helen, a 35-year-old stay-at-home wife who deeply cherishes the tranquility of our home, a cherished legacy from my late parents. Before we dive in, please like and subscribe for more stories like mine. Now, let me share the turbulence hidden beneath the calm of my once peaceful life. The crisp autumn air did little to sweeten the bitterness of that evening. As Ted and his family gathered in our living room, the contrast between the serene leaves outside and the tension inside was stark. "We think it's time Sarah, your sister-in-law, had a proper place to live," Ted's mother declared, her tone broking no argument. "This house would be perfect for her. This is our home, and it's in my name. Why should we give it up?" I protested, a mix of disbelief and anger in my voice. "It's what's best for the family," Ted replied, his tone firm, expecting compliance. "We're thinking of Sarah's future." Their demand stunned me. It wasn't just a request. It was a directive, a clear expectation that I would simply step aside. "Helen, you need to consider what's good for everyone," Ted's father added, his words echoing the family's entitlement. Feeling cornered, I shot back, "And what about what's good for me? Doesn't that matter at all?" Their responses were a blend of condescension and feigned sympathy, as if explaining to a child why they couldn't have candy before dinner. "You'll see, this will work out better for everyone," Ted's mother insisted, as if the decision was already made. The meeting ended in heavy silence on my part, their words lingering like a bad taste. Ted appeared apologetic but resolute, a combination that only fueled my growing resentment. "Helen, please think about it for the family." Ted tried to soften the blow as his family left, leaving us alone with the remnants of a once happy evening turned sour. As the door closed behind them, the weight of the situation settled on my shoulders. This wasn't just about finding Sarah a place to live. It was a test of my limits, a clear sign that my independence was under siege. Watching the shadows dance across our living room floor, I knew this was just the beginning of a storm threatening to sweep away everything I held dear. "If you loved me, you'd see why this is so important," Ted pressed one evening as we cleared the dinner dishes. His plea cut sharply against the quiet clinks of porcelain. "Love isn't about giving up everything I am, or have just to suit your or your family's needs," I countered, feeling my patience wearing thin. "But it's just a house, Helen. We can find another place, make new memories," Ted insisted, his voice a mix of frustration and desperation. "A house you want me to give up for your sister while you offer me nothing in return but ultimatums." My voice broke, echoing louder than intended in the kitchen. The discussion went cold, the air between us thick with tension. That night, as I lay in bed, the reality of my marriage built on conditional love weighed heavily on me. The next morning, Lisa came over, finding me among the autumn blooms that seemed oblivious to the chill in my life. "They're bullying you, Helen." "It's clear as day," Lisa said, sitting beside me on the bench. Her presence was a comforting contrast to the turmoil in my home. "It feels like I'm in a trap, Lisa. If I give in now, what will they ask for next?" My question hung in the air, more for myself than for her. "Stand your ground, Helen. This is your home, your sanctuary. You don't owe it to anyone, especially not as a blackmail payment." Lisa's advice was firm, her hand squeezing mine in solidarity. I nodded, a spark of resolve igniting within me. I knew I needed to defend my boundaries, even within my own marriage. "You have rights, and don't let anyone, especially not Ted, make you doubt that," Lisa had said, her gaze stern yet kind. Her words echoed through my mind as the days passed. Each attempt by Ted to sway me seemed to clash against the shield of determination I was building. "I need you to understand this isn't just about what I want. It's about respect," I told Ted one evening. No longer pleading, I was now firmly asserting our roles. Ted looked at me, perhaps for the first time truly seeing the resolve in my eyes. "I didn't realize it was this serious to you," he admitted, his voice softer, but it was too late for softness. It is serious, Ted. It's not just about a house. It's about whether I'm a partner in this marriage or just a pawn in your family's games, I declared, the clarity of my stance crystallizing with each word. As the confrontation drew to a close, the air felt different, charged with the potential for change, whether together or apart. Whatever the outcome, I knew Lisa was right. This was about control, and I was no longer willing to be controlled. If you don't agree, Helen, I don't see how our marriage can continue, Ted said coldly one afternoon, his ultimatum hanging heavily between us. Family unity? Or is it just about what your mother and you want, regardless of my feelings? I asked sharply, not only seeking his response, but also highlighting the unilateral decisions being forced upon me. This isn't just my decision. It's what's logical for everyone involved, Ted replied, trying to frame his assertiveness as rationality. Logical for whom, Ted? Because it certainly doesn't feel logical to me. The person whose name is on the deed, the person who inherited this house from her parents, I countered. The intensity of my own voice surprised me, a stark reminder of everything at stake. As the days passed, every conversation with Ted seemed to drive us further apart. His family's demands echoed in his words, overshadowing our shared history. Desperate for clarity and support, I reached out to Lisa again. You need to think about your future, Helen. This isn't just about a house. It's about how you're treated in this relationship, Lisa advised over coffee in her warm, inviting kitchen. Her words were sincere and forthright, a compass in the storm. I know, Lisa. I feel like I'm at a breaking point. It's not just about the house anymore. It's about respect and my autonomy. I confided, the weight of my reality sinking in. Then maybe it's time to consider what your life would look like without Ted. If he can't respect your autonomy, is that really the partnership you want to continue? Lisa's question wasn't just hypothetical. It was a call to action. Her question lingered in my mind, growing louder with each passing day. The thought of taking such a definitive step was daunting, yet increasingly necessary. One evening, as Ted brought up the topic again, I found the courage to confront the future. I felt a mixture of fear and resolve as I spoke. If this marriage can only continue on your terms and your family's terms, then maybe it's not a marriage I can stay in. My voice carried the strength of my inner determination. Are you saying you want a divorce? Ted's reaction was a blend of disbelief and anger, his facade of control slipping. I'm saying I want a marriage based on mutual respect and love, not ultimatums and control. If that's not possible, then yes, maybe a divorce is the only answer, I replied, each word measured to reflect the pain and empowerment of my decision. Ted was silent, his usual rebuttal absent as the weight of our conversation settled around us. The next days blurred with tension, each of us contemplating the potential end of our marriage. I took steps to protect my interests, meeting with a lawyer to discuss my options and prepare for possible legal battles. You have strong grounds to keep your property, and if it comes to divorce, to defend your rights, the lawyer assured me, her professionalism a stark contrast to the emotional chaos at home. Armed with legal advice and newfound determination, I readied myself for whatever lay ahead, whether reconciliation or separation. I was prepared to face it on my terms, no longer a bystander but the author of my own story. You've gone too far, Helen. How could you do this to us, to me? Ted's voice thundered through our soon-to-be former home as I folded my last set of linens, methodically smoothing the creases to calm my rattled nerves. It was never about us, Ted. It was always about what you and your family wanted. I'm reclaiming my life, I replied, my voice calm and steady in contrast to his escalating anger. This is betrayal, Helen. You've betrayed my trust and my family's, he accused, his face flushed with fury. Betrayal? I think not. Protecting myself from manipulation isn't betrayal, I countered, standing firm in my decision. I countered, my resolve hardening with each word as I continued packing. Ted's mother, Martha, entered the room like a chilling gust of wind. You're destroying this family, selling this house out from under us. You selfish girl, she hissed, her words laced with venom. I am not responsible for holding together a family that doesn't respect me, I said, facing her with a defiance that had been building over years of suppressed grievances. This was my home, my sanctuary, and I will not be bullied into submission. Ted stood between us, torn between allegiances. Is there no way we can resolve this? Think about what you're doing, Helen. I've thought about it more than you know. It's decided, Ted. I am moving on. I said, my decision clear and final. The moving truck arrived the next morning. As I oversaw the loading of my life into boxes, Ted tried one last time. "You don't have to do this, Helen. We can work it out." "I needed a partner who stood by me, not one caught between me and his family's demands," I replied, not pausing in my tasks. With each box that left the house, I felt a weight lifting. I wasn't just moving my belongings. I was shifting the boundaries of my life, setting new, healthier limits. As the final items were loaded, I took one last look at the house. It had been a place of love and conflict, of growth and retreat. Now it was just a building in my rearview mirror. Goodbye, Ted. I wish things could have been different, I said, more to close the chapter than out of hope for reconciliation. "Helen, Ted began, but I didn't stay to hear the end. As I drove away, I felt the strings of manipulation and control cut cleanly for the first time in years. My phone buzzed with a message from Lisa. "You're free now. Coffee's on me when you're ready." I smiled, driving toward my new beginning. I knew the road ahead would be challenging, but it was mine to travel, free from the shadows of others' desires. My heart was heavy yet hopeful, ready for whatever lay ahead, armed with the lessons of the past and the promise of a future built on my own terms. Sitting across from Ted in the stark, neutral-colored room where our divorce mediation took place, I felt an unusual sense of detachment. His attempts to sway the mediator with emotional appeals only highlighted why this path was necessary. "Helen, can't we just discuss this? There must be another way," Ted implored, his voice strained as he leaned across the table, searching for a glimpse of the connection we once shared. "No, Ted. Discussions were for when I was being manipulated and threatened. This is the result of that," I replied firmly, my voice clear and resolute, no longer swayed by his pleas. As Ted realized his usual tactics were futile, his demeanor shifted to one of frustration and resignation. "Helen, you're making a huge mistake," he muttered under his breath. "Actually, Ted, I'm correcting one," I countered without hesitation, surprising even myself with the calm assertiveness that had grown within me. The mediator intervened, steering the conversation back to logistics. "Let's focus on the division of assets. Helen, you've mentioned there are some personal items you wish to retain." "Yes, items from my parents, things that hold sentimental value and have no relevance to Ted," I explained, listing the items that connected me to a past before my marriage began to suffocate me. Throughout the meeting, Lisa sat beside me, a silent pillar of support. Her presence was a constant reminder that I wasn't alone, that I had people in my corner who valued me for who I am, not for what I could give. After the meeting, as we walked to her car, Lisa squeezed my hand. "How are you holding up?" "Better than I thought," I replied. "It's like I'm finally breathing fresh air after being underwater for too long," I admitted, breathing in the crisp, invigorating autumn air around us. "You're right, Lisa. I'm not just surviving, I'm reclaiming my life." Lisa's smile was both proud and encouraging, and I felt a wave of relief mixed with the adjustment to my new reality. Moving into a small apartment felt like stepping into a new world, one where every choice was mine alone. The space was minimal, the decor simple, reflecting the fresh start I was embracing. One evening, as I unpacked the last of my boxes, I came across an old photo album that my mother had compiled over the years. Flipping through its pages, I was flooded with memories of happier times, which brought both smiles and tears. It was then that I truly realized how far I had come, how much I had endured, and how much I had overcome. The phone rang, jolting me from my reverie. It was Ted, his voice softer and almost hesitant. "I just wanted to say I hope you find what you're looking for." "Thank you, Ted. I already have," I responded, the finality of my words closing the chapter on the past and opening the door to the future. With the divorce finalized and my past officially behind me, I look forward to the days ahead with a renewed sense of hope and excitement. I have plans and dreams that have been shelved, now ready to be pursued. Life awaited, not as a continuation of what was, but as a celebration of what could be. As I closed the photo album and placed it on a shelf, it wasn't just a book being set down. It was the foundation of a new narrative, one where I was the author of my own story, finally pouring a perfect latte, the steam swirling up like the new hopes and possibilities before me. I glanced across the counter at Lisa, who was chatting with one of our regulars. The cafe buzzed with the lively energy of a community coming together, a stark contrast to the isolation of my past life. "It's incredible, isn't it?" Lisa said, joining me behind the counter, Her eyes sparkled with the pride and joy we both felt. It really is, I agreed, handing a freshly brewed coffee to a waiting customer who greeted me with a warm smile. Every cup we serve is a reminder of what we've overcome. Just think, 6 months ago this was all just an idea, Lisa remarked as she wiped down the counter. And now it's a place that brings people together. It feels like we're not just serving coffee but building a community. My heart swelled with every satisfied customer's nod and smile. The bell above the door jingled as a new customer walked in. It was Mia, a young woman who had recently moved into the neighborhood. She approached the counter with a shy smile. "Good morning. Could I get the usual, please?" Mia asked, her tone friendly and familiar. "Of course, coming right up," I replied, starting on her drink. "How's the new job going?" "It's going well, thanks for asking. This place has become a part of my morning ritual. It's so comforting," Mia shared, her gratitude evident. Hearing this, I felt an immense satisfaction that went beyond just business success. Our cafe was touching lives, offering comfort and a sense of belonging. As the morning rush waned, Lisa and I took a moment to enjoy a coffee together. "We should think about hosting some events here, maybe live music nights or art shows," Lisa suggested, always thinking of ways to deepen our cafe's connection with the community. "I love that idea. Let's turn this place into a hub for creativity, where artists can showcase their work," I said, thrilled by the prospect of expanding our impact. Just then, my phone chimed softly with a message from Ted, the first in weeks. "I heard about the cafe. Congratulations. It seems like you're really making a new start." Reading the message, I felt a swirl of emotions. I typed back, "Thank you, Ted. It's a new chapter." The finality of our past relationship cast a bittersweet shadow over my new life. Putting my phone away, I turned back to Lisa. "So about the live music night, let's set a date. It's time to celebrate growth, creativity, and community." As the day went on, the cafe buzzed with the afternoon crowd, each person adding to the story of our place. Behind the counter, I found a comforting rhythm in the routine, each swirl of cream a symbol of my newfound peace. Closing the cafe that evening, I locked the door and stood outside, gazing through the large windows at the cozy space we had created. The journey from a life controlled by others to one where I was the master of my own destiny had been long and challenging. But as I turned the key and stepped into the cool evening air, I knew every difficult step was worth it. This wasn't just a new beginning, it was my reclamation of life, joy, and autonomy. In this little cafe, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. Now I'd love to hear from you. Do you think Helen was right to sell the house without discussing it with Ted, given the circumstances? This situation raises important questions about personal freedom versus family obligations. What's your take on balancing these aspects in a relationship? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, please like the video and consider subscribing to the channel for more engaging content like this. Your support helps us keep these stories coming. Hi, I'm Linda. Before I get into the thick of some serious family drama, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button if you want to see how this all plays out. At 41, I faced an unexpected twist in my life, not just with my husband Jacob, but with his family as well. What was meant to be a joyous occasion when we bought our dream home quickly spiraled into something far more complicated. Here's the scene. Jacob and I were basking in the joy of our new home, which we had imagined as a tranquil retreat from the chaos of the outside world. But of course, Jacob's family had other plans. His mother and sister have always been insufferably entitled, acting as though Jacob's every success should be shared with them. My mother-in-law, in particular, has a knack for overstepping boundaries, and my sister-in-law is always scheming behind the scenes. Just as we were settling in and relishing our achievement, we were hit with an unexpected bombshell. My mother-in-law made a shocking proposal. She demanded that Jacob and I give up our new home to make room for her other son, his wife, and their growing family, who are now expecting their 7th child. She justified it with claims of their financial difficulties and the impending baby. No warning, no discussion, just a flat-out demand. "I don't understand, Mom," Jacob said during one of our family dinners, his confusion and irritation unmistakable. "Why would you think we'd agree to something like this without even discussing it with us first?" Jacob's mother, ever ready with an answer, tried to downplay the situation. "Well, it seemed obvious to me. You have the space, and they need it more right now. And you thought it was acceptable to decide what we should do with our home without even asking us. I couldn't mask my frustration. Her presumption was beyond infuriating. It's family, Linda. You support family, she snapped, as if it were the most self-evident thing in the world. But at what cost? I fired back. We worked tirelessly for this. It's our home, not a temporary haven for anyone who needs it. The conversation quickly escalated as Jacob's sister joined in, backing up their mother. You can always find another place. This is about my brother and his kids. But why should we be the ones to move? Jacob countered, his frustration evident. We planned and saved for years to buy this house. The argument dragged on, each exchange thickening the tension in the air. It was clear that we were at an impasse, not only about the house but also about respect and boundaries. Jacob and I held our ground, resolute against what felt like an orchestrated assault. This house symbolized our future and stability, and we weren't about to relinquish it to meet unreasonable demands. As the evening drew to a close, the divide between us had widened. Jacob and I were more determined than ever to chart our own course, rather than bowing to the relentless pressure from his family. It was a pivotal moment for us, marking the beginning of the conflicts we knew lay ahead. No, Mom, we can't let you dictate our lives like this. It's not fair to Linda or to me, Jacob said firmly, though the strain was evident in his voice. Jacob, this is about family helping family. Why can't you understand that? His mother retorted, her voice growing louder with each word. I understand that, but not at the cost of our own happiness and stability. You're asking too much, I interrupted, my frustration boiling over. You want us to give up our home simply because you've decided it's the right thing to do. Exactly. You have the means to help. Jacob's sister chimed in, leaning forward with a steely gaze. And what, are you just going to sit back and let your nieces and nephews suffer? That's not fair, and you know it. I shot back, it's not about the means. It's about making our own choices. We can't be the emergency solution for every family crisis. The room fell into a heavy silence, the tension palpable. Jacob took a deep breath, his gaze shifting between his sister and mother. You both need to understand something, Jacob said slowly and deliberately. Linda and I are a family too. Our decisions are ours to make, not yours to dictate. Jacob, I'm your mother. I thought you'd want to support your brother in his time of need, his mother said, her tone softening as she tried a different approach. I would help him, but not by giving up our home. There are other ways to support family without compromising our own needs, Jacob said, standing his ground. Yeah, right. Like what? You have one of the biggest houses. It's easy for you to say no from your cozy, comfortable home, Sarah retorted, her frustration clear. We worked hard for this, Sarah. You know that, I said, trying to maintain some peace while still holding firm. We planned and saved for years. Why should we give all that up just because family is supposed to come first? It does, but so do our marriage and our future, Jacob replied firmly. We're open to helping in other ways, but not at the expense of our home. The debate dragged on, with neither side willing to give an inch. Jacob and I understood this was a pivotal moment in our relationship with his family. If we conceded now, it would set a precedent for constantly prioritizing their needs over our own. After a long and exhausting discussion, it became clear that their perspective was unshakable. They viewed our home as a quick fix for their issues, rather than acknowledging it as our hard-earned accomplishment. Look, we're not going to resolve this tonight, Jacob said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. You need to go. We'll discuss it further when things have calmed down. His mother and sister gathered their things, their faces set with anger and disappointment. As the door shut behind them, it felt like a solid barrier, one that might be hard to breach again. Yet in that moment, Jacob and I knew we had made the right decision for ourselves and our future. It was a painful but necessary realization. We settled back into our seats, the silence now a sharp contrast to the heated exchange that had just transpired. Though we were together, and that felt reassuring, the calm was fleeting. Jacob and I knew it was only a temporary reprieve, a brief pause before the storm that was sure to follow. As anticipated, our peace was soon shattered by a loud knock that interrupted our tranquility one afternoon. I glanced through the window, my stomach dropping as I saw Jacob's mother and sister standing at our doorstep, their expressions resolute. Jacob, they're here, I called out, struggling to keep the anxiety out of my voice. He sighed deeply, his weariness evident. "Let's face this together, Linda," he said. We opened the door, standing firm on our own threshold. "You need to leave. You're not welcome here. If you don't, I'll have to call the police," I said firmly, my heart racing but my voice resolute. "You're really going to call the police on your own family over a house?" Jacob's sister spat, her voice laced with contempt. "It's not just about the house. It's about respect, something you've consistently failed to show us." Jacob shot back, his resolve unwavering. "We're your family. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" His mother added, a mix of anger and desperation in her voice. "Family doesn't exploit each other like this. We'd offered other solutions, but you refused them." "There's nothing more to discuss," I said firmly, my tone echoing Jacob's earlier determination. "We have nowhere else to go. Think of the children," his sister pleaded, her voice trembling with desperation. "The children deserve stability, but that doesn't come at the expense of ours," Jacob replied, his voice softening just a bit, but his resolve unshaken. The conversation grew more heated as they refused to leave, their demands growing increasingly insistent. "You owe us this after everything we've done for you. What you've done is manipulate and exploit my generosity. No, we're done. You need to leave now, or I'm calling the police," I said, reaching for my phone. Seeing the seriousness of our stance, they finally backed down, but not before throwing a few more hurtful remarks. "You'll regret this. You're tearing this family apart," Jacob's sister shouted as they stormed away. We closed the door and leaned against it, the weight of the confrontation leaving us both feeling drained. "Are we making the right choice?" I whispered, doubt gnawing at me. "Yes, we are, Linda. It's tough, but it's necessary for us, for our future," Jacob reassured me, drawing me into a comforting embrace. The rest of the day was spent in quiet reflection, the echoes of our confrontation still resonating. Despite the lingering guilt and pain, we felt a sense of righteousness in asserting our boundaries. We understood that the conflict might not be over, but we were prepared to protect our peace at any cost. The uneasy calm that followed felt fragile, like the calm before a storm. Jacob and I knew it was only a matter of time before more trouble would come. Our prediction proved accurate when, late one evening as we were watching a movie in an attempt to reclaim some normalcy, my phone started buzzing incessantly. When I checked, I found multiple missed calls and messages from unknown numbers. The content was disturbingly familiar, thinly veiled threats and accusations, clearly orchestrated by Jacob's sister. "If you think you've won, you're mistaken. This isn't over," the message read. I handed the phone to Jacob, who looked increasingly concerned as he read through the threats and accusations. "This is harassment. We can't just ignore it," he said, frustration evident in his voice. "Let's avoid giving them the reaction they're aiming for. We should document everything and consult a lawyer tomorrow," I suggested, trying to stay practical despite my rising anxiety. The next morning, we met with a lawyer and explained the situation while showing the messages. "Keep detailed records and consider seeking a restraining order if this continues," the lawyer advised. "This is no longer just family conflict, it's escalating into harassment." Armed with legal advice, we felt a bit more empowered, but the strain of the family conflict was weighing heavily on us. That afternoon, as we discussed our next steps, Jacob received a call from his mother. "You've gone too far, bringing in lawyers. Can't we just resolve this like a family?" she pleaded through the speakerphone. "Mom, we made an effort to address this calmly, but you and Sarah crossed the line with those messages. We're taking the necessary steps to protect ourselves," Jacob replied, his voice tinged with both sadness and determination. "But we're family. Doesn't that mean anything? Why can't we resolve this among ourselves?" Her voice wavered, revealing her desperation. "Family doesn't threaten each other. We asked for respect, but instead, we faced harassment. That's why it's crucial to set firm boundaries," Jacob responded. I joined Jacob in supporting his stance. The call ended with his mother in tears, but Jacob remained resolute. "Linda, I hate that it's come to this, but I feel like we have no other choice." "I understand, Jacob. It's tough, but we have to protect our peace." That evening, we took extra steps to secure our home, installing cameras and updating our security system. It was disheartening to accept that such measures were necessary, but our priority was our safety and well-being. As days turned into weeks, the tension eased. The messages stopped, and the silence from Jacob's family, though bittersweet, brought a sense of relief. We started to rediscover the joy in our home, spending our evenings remodeling the kitchen, tending to the garden, and enjoying movies without the looming threat of conflict. Through it all, the challenges we faced only strengthened our bond, reinforcing our commitment to protect our marriage and home against any opposition. Despite the difficulties, we stayed united, a testament to our love and resilience. The newfound quiet that settled over our home allowed Jacob and me to finally relax, savoring the sanctuary we had fought so hard to defend. However, that peace was interrupted one crisp morning when a familiar car pulled into our driveway. It was Jacob's mother, alone this time, her expression solemn and uncertain as she approached our front door. As Jacob opened the door, the tension was palpable. "Mom, what are you doing here?" Jacob asked cautiously, his tone guarded to avoid reopening old wounds. "I've come to apologize," she began, her voice wavering slightly. "I've had a lot of time to reflect on everything that's happened." I listened quietly, watching her with a mix of curiosity and apprehension, wondering where this unexpected visit might lead. "Jacob, I see now how wrong I was to try and force your hand, to push Sarah's problems onto you. It wasn't fair," she admitted, glancing between us as if seeking forgiveness. "It took a lot for you to come here and say that," Jacob acknowledged, his tone softening. "What brought about this change of heart?" "I missed you, and seeing Sarah start to take responsibility for her own family made me realize I need to do the same," she explained, her eyes glistening with emotion. "I appreciate your apology, Mom. It means a lot to hear you say that," Jacob responded, his voice reflecting a hint of old warmth. Turning to me, she added, "And Linda, I'm sorry for all the stress I caused you. I hope in time you can forgive me too." "Thank you. That's all we ever wanted, to be treated with respect," I said, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders, though I remained cautious about the future. "Can we start fresh? Maybe not exactly as before, but at least somewhere new." She looked at us, hopeful but uncertain. "Can we try?" she asked. "We can," Jacob agreed. "But it's going to need to be a gradual process. Trust has to be rebuilt." "Of course, I understand. I'll respect your boundaries, I promise," she said earnestly. With that, she left, her visit brief but significant. After she drove away, Jacob and I shared a quiet moment, reflecting on the possibility of mending the strained relationship that had once seemed irreparable. "Do you think she was sincere?" I asked, still absorbing the morning's unexpected turn. "I want to believe she was. People can change, right?" Jacob replied, hopeful yet cautious. "We'll see. Actions speak louder than words," I said, acknowledging the past still felt too fresh to fully embrace optimism. As days turned into weeks, our initial skepticism slowly gave way to cautious optimism. Jacob's mother kept her promise, respecting our boundaries and making genuine efforts to repair the fractured relationship. She reached out before visits and showed a sincere interest in our lives without overstepping. This positive shift extended beyond our interactions with her. It also strengthened our marriage. The trials we faced with his family have fortified our bond, demonstrating that together we could confront challenges and emerge stronger. "We really made it through, didn't we?" Jacob remarked one evening as we relaxed in our garden, savoring the tranquility of our hard-earned sanctuary. "We did, and we'll face whatever comes next together," I affirmed, squeezing his hand. The setting sun bathed us in a warm glow, symbolizing a fresh start in our lives. The story has reached its conclusion, with Linda and Jacob successfully navigating challenging family dynamics to find peace. Now, I'd like to hear from all of you. Is it possible to genuinely rebuild trust after such deep family conflicts, or are some rifts too profound to fully heal? What's your perspective on offering second chances in situations like these? $3,000 for accommodations at a luxury hotel, $1,000 for meals at upscale restaurants, $500 at a renowned spa. What on earth is this? I happened to glance at the credit card statement, something my husband usually handles. A series of charges caught my eye, each more shocking than the last. Even more unsettling, all these extravagant reservations were made for the same dates. Those were the days when my husband, who serves on the PTA at our daughter's middle school, was supposed to attend a board retreat. Even though I'm not well versed in these things, I know exactly what this means. To support me in my demanding job, my husband chose to be a stay-at-home dad, Thanks to his dedication to our family, I've been able to focus on my career without worry. I've always been grateful to him, thinking he was too good to be true, but now I fear his intentions might not have been so pure. Carefully, I slip something into his wallet. Then, I make a call to someone. In a week, he'll likely leave with high spirits. I hope this will be an unforgettable memory for him. My name is Maggie, and I'm a nurse at a university hospital. My days are so busy that I sometimes lose track of time, blending days and nights together. The reason I can keep up with this hectic schedule is my beloved husband, Glenn. I love my job and take pride in it, but the thought of choosing between my marriage and my career has brought me to tears more than once. Glenn respected my determination and chose to become a full-time stay-at-home dad to support our family. He's always encouraged me to give my all at work, never minding the curious glances from other mothers. He even served on the PTA board at our daughter Sasha's middle school. As the breadwinner, I've worked hard to provide for my family. Then, one day, I received a call from the credit card company. I had recently changed the debit account for convenience, but the funds hadn't been deposited in time, leading to an overdraft. Darn it. I muttered as I hurried to check the credit card statement so I could make the transfer. I hadn't looked at the statement in years, trusting Glenn to handle it. I realized just how careless I'd been. My heart nearly stopped when I saw the charges on my phone screen. The total amount was outrageous, and I couldn't recall making any of those purchases. Panicking, I decided to review the details. There, I found a long list of transactions I had no memory of: designer boutiques, famous perfumes, a luxury watch brand. I liked those brands, but I hadn't bought anything from them recently. For a moment, I wondered if Glenn, who had a family card, was planning to surprise me, but I hadn't received anything. What's more, all these purchases were made on Wednesdays, the day I work the night shift, and Glenn has his board meeting. What's going on? I resolved to confront him as soon as I got home. I hurried home, anxiety tightening my chest. Just as I was about to reach my front door, a voice called out to me. "Hi, Maggie. Long time no see. Heading home from work?" It was Tara, one of the few PTA moms I knew from school. She was always friendly, and I had run into her just before I could slip inside. "Hey, long time. Thanks for always helping Glenn out with PTA stuff," I said, trying to sound casual. "I hope he's not giving you too much trouble." I didn't know what else to say, so I stuck to the familiar, safe topics. Tara smiled and gave me a playful nudge on the shoulder, teasing me for acting a little distant. As she shifted closer, a familiar fragrance filled the air, a perfume I knew all too well. It was the signature scent of Puffy Marie, the very same brand listed on my credit card statement. I'd wanted that perfume for ages, had tested it multiple times at the store, but never ended up buying it. The scent lingered in the air, unmistakable, tugging at memories. "Smells amazing," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "That's the one I've been eyeing forever. Did you buy it?" I didn't even know why I asked her that. Maybe it was jealousy, maybe it was something deeper. Either way, I felt a twinge of embarrassment for my own foolishness. But then my mind started to race. Those credit card charges were always made on Wednesdays, days when the PTA meetings took place. And now a PTA member was wearing the exact same perfume. As soon as suspicion took root, it began to grow, faster than I could control. Oblivious to my inner turmoil, Tara smiled brightly and said, "Actually, I got it as a gift. It was our anniversary the other day." She giggled, looking as sweet as ever. "Oh, that's so lovely. You two are still so in love," I replied, forcing a smile while trying to push away the dark thoughts creeping into my mind. After exchanging a few more pleasantries, we said our goodbyes. It wasn't surprising that she had the perfume. It was a popular item, after all. Tara always seemed cheerful, even after having kids. And she still spoke about her anniversary with such joy. But one thing caught my attention as I replayed the conversation in my head. She didn't say husband. I stopped abruptly and turned back to where I had last seen her. Of course, she was gone, but the urge to chase after her was overwhelming. Could Glenn and she have something going on? The tiny doubt that had crept into my mind now grew into something I could no longer ignore. The following Wednesday, my family saw me off to work as usual, but I had a different plan. I asked my colleagues to let me leave early. I didn't tell Glenn, of course. Telling him would have defeated the purpose. I waited for him a short distance from our home, watching and waiting. Soon my mother-in-law arrived to babysit, and Glenn left for his meeting, just as he did every week. So far, everything was routine. I followed him to the school, where the board members gathered in a classroom for their meeting. After about half an hour, the meeting ended, and the members began to leave. Most headed straight home, but Glenn lingered, and then he emerged, arm in arm with Tara. They stared into each other's eyes, their fingers intertwined as they walked toward a nearby hotel. They had no idea I was only a few meters behind them, my face twisted with rage and sorrow. I had trusted him. I had loved him. Had he encouraged me to work long hours just to suit his own convenience? I stood there, feeling utterly betrayed and filled with despair. As if to confirm the painful reality, my phone buzzed with a notification, the latest credit card charge, showing the hotel bill he had just incurred. After what felt like an eternity, they finally left the hotel, looking carefree and content. I calmly snapped pictures of them. There were no more tears. Not even a trace of affection remained in my heart. After that day, I avoided Glenn as much as possible, using my work as an excuse. Part of me wanted to divorce him immediately, but that would mean taking Sasha away from her father. I needed time to think, to decide what was best for all of us. Mom? Sasha's sudden voice snapped me back to reality. Since that day, I had been crying alone in the living room in the middle of the night. I thought I was being discreet, but it seemed she had noticed something was wrong. Whether she couldn't sleep or had just woken up, she came out of bed late one night and gently hugged me. I don't want you to be sad. Your enemies are my enemies. I won't forgive anyone who makes you sad. Her words broke the dam that had been holding back all my emotions. I wept like a child, tears of gratitude for her, apologies, and everything else pouring out. If I divorce your dad, things won't be the same as before, I confessed, my voice trembling. We'd have to move, and we wouldn't be able to see him every day. You might even have to change schools and leave your friends behind. I let all my worries spill out one after another. But she interrupted me, her voice steady and sure. I still want to be with you, Mom. I want to be a nurse like you. I'll be fine, so please, do what you need to do. She held my hands tightly. Thank you, sweetheart, I whispered, feeling a new strength well up inside me. Encouraged by her words, I decided to act on my plan. I had gotten into the habit of checking my credit card statements regularly and soon discovered that Glenn was planning a week-long trip, supposedly for a PTA board retreat. In the past, I would have signed off without a second thought, but common sense told me it was unthinkable for parents with children to be away from home for a week at the same time. Even if it were to happen, the destination and type of hotel Glenn had booked were far from the norm. He had underestimated me, assuming I wouldn't find out, but his attempts to hide the evidence were becoming increasingly difficult. I had gathered more than just the list of credit card transactions. I had detailed records of the courses at a chic restaurant, the confirmation of the hotel booking, and even a request for a surprise cake. I had been so grateful to him for quitting his job and becoming a stay-at-home dad. I felt it was my duty to work hard to provide for our family in return. But I definitely wasn't working so he could betray us and fool around like this. He was not going to get away with this. On my next day off, I calmly set my plan for revenge into motion. First, I called the hotel and every restaurant he had booked. Even though the reservations were made in his name, I knew all the details, and when I mentioned I was his wife, they didn't suspect a thing. Later that night, I took his wallet, which he had left in the living room, and pulled out his credit card. Before we got married, he only carried cash and had never made his own card, aside from the family one we shared. If his only card went missing, he wouldn't immediately think something was wrong, so I replaced it with an expired card I found. It had been renewed about 6 months ago, but I'd been too lazy to dispose of it. I almost laughed at how my own laziness had worked in my favor. The expired card looked identical to the new one, but of course, it wouldn't work. If he tried to use it, he'd quickly realize something was off, but that would only happen once he was far from home. I'm leaving now. Got a lot of discussions to make the school better. Sasha, take good care of your mom. Okay. Glenn left the house smiling, completely unaware of what was coming. Sasha and I saw him off with matching smiles, though mine held a secret. I could have confronted him right then, but strangely, I felt a deep sense of peace, knowing this was the last time I'd see him. Well, let's get started, I said calmly. Yes, Sasha replied. The moment Glenn was out of sight, our smiles vanished, and we rushed to pack our belongings. The movers arrived shortly after, and thanks to their efficiency, we settled into our new home in no time. "Excuse me, where should we place these?" one of the movers asked, pointing to a stack of boxes. "Oh, don't worry about those. Just leave them there," I said. The boxes, filled with Glenn's belongings, were all that remained of him in our lives. I handed them over to another mover who came to pick them up. There was nothing left in the house after that. In the living room, once filled with memories, I left a pile of credit card statements and the photos I had taken of him and Tara. Beside them, I placed my wedding ring, now meaningless, and the dreaded divorce papers. My phone buzzed with missed calls, every single one from Glenn. He must have noticed something was wrong during his trip. Too bad for him. I sent him a text, calmly explaining that I had been unable to respond due to several emergency operations. I glanced at my vibrating phone in the taxi and quickly shoved it to the bottom of my bag. By the time his frantic calls had stopped, my call history was filled with his desperate attempts, almost 100 of them. Sasha and I couldn't help but giggle at the sight. "Oh right, I should probably make one last call," I said, smirking. "Yeah, that's a good idea," Sasha agreed. We dialed the number. Later that day, "What's going on here? Maggie? Sasha? Anybody home?" Glenn returned from his week-long affair, brimming with confidence, only to be met with an empty house. His face turned ashen as he saw what I'd left behind: credit card statements, divorce papers, and a photo of him and Tara. He tried calling me repeatedly, but of course I didn't answer. I blocked him. Then his phone rang. An unknown number. Desperate, he answered, hoping it was me. "Hello? What the hell have you done?" I was asked to pay for all the bookings I'd already prepaid online, and now my credit card is expired. Do you have any idea how humiliated I was? This is nothing but harassment. Did you have to borrow money from everyone, Glenn? If you borrowed $5,000 from each of them, that's quite a sum. Did you go overseas? I hope Tara didn't give you too much trouble, came the cold, commanding voice from the other end. Glenn went pale and began trembling so badly he couldn't get a word out. "Is this Tara's husband?" Glenn stammered. "Yes, this is her husband. I know everything about you two. I will be demanding alimony from her, and I won't let you both get away with this." The line went dead as soon as he finished. Glenn was left in stunned silence, his mind reeling. Panicking, he tried to contact Tara, but her phone was disconnected. It had already been canceled. It was her husband who had called me earlier that day after I informed him of their affair. He had been surprised, but not devastated. In fact, he sounded deeply sorry, admitting that he had suspected her for some time. It was a shock for Tara's cheating partner to learn that his mistress was someone he knew well. In fact, he even offered to cooperate with me to help with my plans. After getting Tara's parents' address from him, I sent all of Glenn's belongings along with copies of the divorce papers and photos of their affair to them. Naturally, Tara's parents were furious. Their outrage was so intense that the entire neighborhood soon knew about Tara's divorce and her potential loss of custody due to her infidelity. Her parents, who were wealthy and ran a successful local business, were particularly appalled. They had expected their daughter to get their support regardless, but her actions had tarnished their family's reputation. They refused to let her inside their home when she came to them in tears. With nowhere else to turn, Tara ended up living alone in a small apartment, working grueling hours at a notoriously low-paying job to manage alimony payments. Meanwhile, Sasha and I moved in temporarily with my parents until the divorce was finalized. Glenn returned to his old life, though I've stayed in touch with his parents, who still cared deeply for Sasha. According to his father, Glenn now spends every waking moment on the farm, struggling to keep up with alimony and child support payments. His father sounded deeply disappointed in him. My attorney successfully negotiated a substantial alimony settlement on top of child support, making Glenn's monthly payments quite hefty. He'll likely have to work hard for years to come just to get by, with little left for himself. It seems like a relentless struggle. Once the divorce was finalized, Sasha and I moved into a new home. She transferred to a different school, where her new teachers and classmates welcomed her warmly, and she's been thriving in her new environment. With Glenn now a part of the past, I handle the housework myself. Balancing work and home is more challenging than I had anticipated, but I find it preferable to living with deceit and betrayal. I feel rejuvenated and free from the negativity that once clouded my life. I'm more determined than ever to find happiness and put my full effort